You are listening to The World As I See It podcast. 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 As I See It podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to The World As I See It. This is my last episode of 2025. And I want to take a quick moment right now and sincerely thank each and every one of you for listening to this podcast since I launched back in June. Your support and engagement and encouragement have made this a truly fantastic year. So last week I talked about the serious discrimination against people with service dogs. And this week I am focusing on a constant daily truth in my life. The world simply wasn't built with blind people in mind. This theme that the daily systems were not designed for us is the root of so much conflict and so much frustration. I've run into these barriers myself countless times, and this issue has affected me more than any other thing. This kind of unfair treatment is deeply frustrating because it constantly reminds me that I was an afterthought. What we really need is universal design. This is the idea that spaces and tools should be built from start to finish to be usable by everyone, regardless of their ability. When we don't use universal design, we create unfair barriers. Let's start with the digital world. The internet is a huge part of my life, especially as a student. But I face discrimination constantly when I try to use websites that are not accessible. When a website is built poorly, it creates a massive unfair obstacle that no amount of personal skill can overcome. Think about the assumptions here. The people who build these sites assume that every user is using a mouse and their eyes. And that assumption leaves people who rely on a keyboard and a screen reader completely shut out. Sometimes I have to have people sit and read for me, especially for math. And the problem is that some of these educational websites, they were not built for us. Or they'll say that they are accessible, but they're really only built for people with low vision, and they might have big fonts, but the underlying code, it doesn't work with my screen reader. And for me, the equations, they might be an image with no description, or the buttons are not labeled and the screen reader just says button. Think about that for a second. If your screen reader just kept saying button, and you are swiping all over that screen, there's no way that I would have any idea what I'm clicking on. I could be clicking submit, save, or delete. I don't know. And this is unfair and deeply frustrating because it takes away my independence and forces me into a dependent role simply because of bad design. And this is a daily struggle. And it's not just school. I've been entirely locked out of simple things like making a new account or checking important documents because of these visual puzzles. Like those little CAPTCHAs, these little boxes, they'll ask you to, prove that you're not a robot by picking pictures of bicycles or, traffic lights. And when these don't have an audio alternative choice, I'm locked out. I can't use it. I'm blocked. I'm locked out of this basic function of modern world. And that failure to include an accessible option is a form of discrimination. This failure to design for all users spills over into the physical world too, especially as businesses rely on technology to manage customers. I'm talking specifically about self-checkout machines and other kiosks. When I go to the grocery store, these large touchscreens, they have no real buttons, no place to plug in headphones for audio, and no way for me to know what's actually on the screen. The machine is designed on the assumption that everyone can see it. What happens then? What do I do then? Well, I am forced to stop what I'm doing and ask a sighted person for help because I cannot use the self-checkout or the kiosks due to their bad design. This completely takes away my privacy and my independence. The whole point of a self-checkout is speed and doing it yourself. But for me, it forces me to give up my privacy and slow down the whole line while I wait for a worker or somebody in my family to either guide my finger to the right spot or push the buttons for me because I can't. I am forced to rely on someone else just to buy something simple. And it is a constant reminder that in that moment, the world does not treat me as an independent consumer. The effect of these small barriers, it's huge. That's why blindness is not always easy some days. And ultimately, the source of all this friction is the failure to assume that people are capable. People who build websites, design kiosks, and pass laws often assume that if you are blind, you cannot do complex tasks, or act on your own, or you can't do anything independent, or you're not capable. And this is the direct result of a world not designed for us in the visually impaired community. And this is where the pressure comes from. I have to constantly fight against that low expectation of not being capable. Of people saying, oh, well, you can't do that because you can't see. And I don't get offended easy. I really don't. But if you tell me that I can't do something, I'm going to want to prove you wrong. Anyway, to fight against that expectation, I have to fight the website. I have to fight the checkout machine. I have to fight for access and for independence. The discrimination is not always a shout. It is the invisible barrier that locks me out. It is the constant message that I am not allowed to be independent simply because the system assumes that I can't handle it. My voice and my stories are how I am going to push back. I have to keep speaking up to make sure that the next website, the next kiosk, and the next law are built using my universal design from the beginning, without forcing me to fight for access after the fact. These conversations about discrimination against people with service dogs to the discrimination of living in a world not designed for me are essential. They show the real results of assumptions. And I have to keep talking about the gap between what people assume that I can do and what I actually can do. The goal is a world that assumes people are capable, not one that assumes limitations. I hope that these episodes have truly educated you and that you have gained valuable insights into my real-world challenges faced by the visually impaired community and gained my perspective. If you have any questions, ideas for episode topics, or just feedback, you can email me at theworldasiseeitpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your support this year. Stay curious and keep listening. And I will talk to y'all in the new year.
You've been listening to The World as I See It podcast.